Today we're going to talk about your type and your typography using your type tool. Without text, without your type, you just have a pretty image. Your designs need to have some kind of call to action. They need to make people want to do something. They need to make people want to read. And people don't want to read nowadays. If you don't have interesting, unique looking type, the likelihood that somebody's going to stop and read what you've created is very low. So to create more interesting typography is to draw more people into paying attention to what you have to say. Now there is a lot of vocabulary that goes around this. So over on the right hand side, you can see that I've got a list of a lot of the terms that are used in typography. There is a lot to text. A lot of this we're going to go over in different lessons along the way, but I would give this all a good look so that you're understanding what we're talking about in some of these scenarios. Now, really there are two basic types of font. There are serifs and then there are sans serifs. Serifs are used to make shapes more identifiable more quickly. So if you think of like old books or any book for that matter that you read, the font inside is going to be a serif font because having these little feet and these little extras that you never actually write make that shape more identifiable quicker, which means you read faster. Now, sans serif fonts, fonts without those little feet, are used in a lot of different regards, but primarily for digital communication. So most fonts that are on your computer, on your phone, on your TV are going to be sans serif. Most things that are printed, however, will have these little serifs on them. So we're going to talk about those and go into more detail. There are subcategories of both of these, but almost every font falls into one of these two categories. Below, we've got our character panel we're going to be talking about and some more vocabulary we're going to be looking at. And we've got our tools that we're going to be using. I do want to avoid using the two vertical tools. I find that people don't really read vertical text well. As English speakers, we read left to right, not top to bottom. Most Asian cultures read top to bottom, then left to right. Arabic cultures read right to left and then top to bottom. But as English speakers, we tend to read in a specific way, and we should use our text in that way. Now, the three main words that I need you to remember today are kerning, tracking, and leading. We're going to look at what all three of these are, but those are your main three words that I need you to pick up today. So let's go into our document. Let's zoom in to where it says your name right here. And let's take a second to look at the layers panel. So in the layers panel, you can see that I've got a few different layers for you to work with, but for the most part, we're going to be making our own layers today. So click on the layer that says type on a circle. That's where we're going to start just so that all text goes above that. Now, T for your type tool. You're going to click up here to the top left of this box one time, and it's going to pop in this black box. Now mine came in with nothing in it, but if I change the font color, you can see it says lorem ipsum. Lorem ipsum is placeholder text. It just sits there so you know where it is. I want you to type in your first and last name, please. Now, once you've typed that in, you can select that text, going back and forth with your type tool like this held down. One thing you'll notice is when you're in this text, things like shortcuts for brush or move tool don't work. So if I hit B, it's going to type the letter B. It's not going to move to my brush tool. If I need to get out of this text, I can hit escape on my keyboard. That'll kind of lock it into place. And then I can move between my tools however I want to. Now, if I want to get back into my text, I'll hit T on my keyboard to get my type tool. And I'll hover around my text, and I'll notice that I have this little box moving around my cursor. If I click again, it'll create a new piece of text. But if I hover this tool over existing text, it'll get rid of that box, and it'll allow you to highlight that text. So highlight your last name, please. And with your last name, I'd like you to change the font to something completely different. Look at your first name and pick a font that looks nothing like that first piece of font. When you highlight it, you can choose a different color as well. So this shows you that you can utilize different colors, different fonts inside the same piece of text. You don't have to go find different text boxes. You can do it all in one. Now, I'd like you to select your first name right at the end of your first name. Click, hold, and drag to your last name. You may notice that there's a space here, and sometimes this space that you naturally type can create a bit of an issue for you if you're dealing with certain things. So I want you to highlight that space, and then I want you to hit enter or return on your keyboard to drop your last name underneath your first name. Now, we need to go to our properties panel and look at our characters panel real quick. So over on the right hand side, we have our characters panel. And we can see the name of our font, the type of font that we have, whether it be bold, light, italic. We can see our font size right here. But we have three other options here, and these three other options matter. These are our leading, our kerning, and our tracking. Now, each one of these does a very specific thing, and I'm going to go through them one at a time. So we're going to start with kerning right here underneath. Now, what I want you to do is place your cursor between any two letters in your first name. And right here under the font size is your kerning option. I want you to make your kerning bigger, and you'll see there's more space between those letters. I want you to make it smaller, minus, and you'll see there's less space between those letters. Kerning is the spacing between individual letters. A lot of times we're working with free fonts, and the fonts you don't pay for come in with some issues. Even the fonts you pay for come in with some issues. So you might have to reduce or add kerning in certain places. This can also add kind of a stylized effect to certain things if you want it to. Now I'd like you to select your entire first name. And over here on the right, at the bottom right corner, there's another VA. This is your tracking. Now the tracking is the space between all of your letters. So if you make that smaller or bigger, it'll stretch that out, adding a little bit of space between every letter without distorting the letter, which is key. So I want you to space out your first name pretty good. I want you to make it pretty wide. Your last name. I want you to highlight your last name, and we're going to look at the one we didn't look at before. The last name, I want you to go to the top right corner of your character panel, and I want you to find the leading. If you hover over it, it'll tell you what it is. The leading is the space between individual lines. So think about it when you were a kid, you were writing on notebook paper, that little blue line that separated each one, that is your leading. That's how leaded out that was. Everybody's tickled when the teacher says read this double-spaced or type a double-spaced document as opposed to a single space. I want you to reduce your leading so that your first and last name are almost touching. Not quite, almost touching. Then I want you to take your shorter or longer name, whichever floats your boat, and I want you to reduce the tracking or add tracking so that your two names are equal in size. Your text tool can be used to manipulate the font size up here, but there are other ways to change the size of your text as well. Hit escape on your keyboard, then command or control T. That'll give you your bounding box, and you can make your text bigger or smaller, just like that as well. When you hit return, locks it into place. Good. So now that you've got that, let's move over to the right. Text area is a little different, and unless you know what you're doing or you're doing it for specific reasons, I recommend not doing it this way. A lot of my students, when they're creating text, click and drag like this with their type tool, and they get a little lost as to what they're doing. It's nothing wrong with it, you just got to know what you're looking at. So when I release here, it's going to fill it with lorem ipsum text again. Now notice that the box stays here. If I were to shrink this font down, there's more text that's hidden in this box that I didn't even know was there. Notice this little plus symbol in the bottom right corner. That means there's more text underneath this that you can't see. So it's selected, I'll just make it a little bit smaller along the way. Now this text works with this box, meaning if I make this box move, the text will move to fit the shape of that box as best it can, right? The text comes in left aligned, meaning there's a flush line right here on the left. In your control panel, your options bar at the top, you'll see you have options for left aligned text, centrally aligned text, and right aligned text. Use these to your discretion. I will tell you if you're doing large amounts of text, you probably need to be left aligned. Now, I've got my text at 12 points. I'm on Myriad Pro. I'd recommend you being the same. And I want you to go back to your leading again. And I want you to spread your leading out a little bit. Are you more likely to read this if it has more space in it? Or are you more likely to read it if the space is tight? The answer is the wider space, right? So you generally want a little bit of spacing in your text along the way so that it makes it a little bit more user-friendly. All right, so let's move down and we're going to look at the Type on a Path tool. Now, the Type on a Path tool means there has to be a path first. So this gets a little tricky. I would like you to hit P on your keyboard to get your pen tool, please. Now with the pen tool, I'm going to click one time to the left of type. That's going to create one anchor point. I'm going to go over here and on just underneath the word on, I'm going to click, hold, and drag to create kind of a curved shape. And then over here at the end of the word path, I'm going to click again, hold, and drag to create another curved shape. I don't care what it looks like as long as there's some curve there, right? All right, so I'll hit T on my keyboard again, and I'm going to click right on that path. And when I do, it puts text directly on that path. So that means I can have type that fits onto this however I want it to look. So if I want my text to have this little wavy look, I can. If I want it to have a circular or square look, I can do that. Once you've got that, let's move down. Now, we're going to do the same thing here, creating text on a path. However, we're going to do it a little bit differently because our path is closed. So you're going to need to find your layer of Type on Circle. Click on that for me. You're going to get your Type tool, and you're going to be very careful here because there's a couple of things that are going to happen. And let me zoom in. If I am not on the circle, I get this box around saying, do you want to create a new piece of text? I don't necessarily. If I go to the line, I get this squiggly line saying it's going to put text on the line, which is what I want. But if I misclick just by a little bit, I end up with this circular shape. And if I click on this, I get text inside the circle. This is not what I'm looking for just yet. So if this happens to you, make sure you hit Control or Command Z real quick so that that goes away. Now with your Type tool, you want to click right on that line, right in the middle left side of it. And I want you to type your name again. You can select this just like any other text. I just hit Command or Control A right there. I can change the font again. I can change the font size to make it fit a little differently. I can change the font color. So there are options here for how you want this to look. All right, so once you've got this, let's move over to the right-hand side and let's look at putting text into shapes. So I'm going to click on Type in Shape. I'm going to hit T on my keyboard. And this time I do want to see that circle around my cursor. When I click into this shape, it's going to add text into this shape. It's going to use whatever font and size you were using recently. So I need to reduce this to make this really look like how I want it to. So I'm going to shrink my text down pretty significantly. I'm going to be down around 12 points again. And once I've got it around 12 points, I can see that this is actually matching up to the shape that I've made here. So this creates interesting looks. I can put a little picture in here that'll fit into that area. I can see how that text would move. Now to create that shape, I would create any shape. I could use my pen tool for this one to kind of draw this shape, or I could use my shape tool to create the shape I want the text to go into. You do still have your options for how you align this, whether it be center or right aligned. All right, once you've got that, let's move down to kerning, leading, and tracking. So just to go back over this real quick, kerning is the space between individual characters. Tracking is the space between all characters, and leading is the space between lines of text. So what I'd like you to do is type your name first and last right here. And for kerning, I'd like you to find two locations and increase or decrease the kerning in your name. Doesn't have to be pretty, don't care what it looks like, as long as I can see that you know what kerning is. Let's move over to leading. Type your first and last name. You will need to separate these two, so make sure you hit a return between the two. And I want you to space out this leading so that this text is literally on top of each other. I want to see them touching. All right, once you've got that, let's go to tracking. Again, type out your name right here. And I'd like you to select it and increase the tracking way out. You might need to reduce the size of your text a little bit so that it fits in the box. So kerning, tracking, leading. Every Adobe certification has these words in it. So they're good words to know. You need to keep them in mind. Now let's move down to the image, please. And the image is where we get to have a little fun with it. In your layers panel, you'll notice that you've been creating text layers along the way. T for text layers. Go down a little ways until you see the bottom blue layer. That is the type mask tool. So I want to use this image right here, and I want to put text on top of it, cutting that text into the image. Now I'm going to show you a few different ways to do this. So the right way to do it, the way with the horizontal type mask tool, is to grab this horizontal type mask tool, click one time. Whoa, everything turns red. You're good, I promise you. Type your name. Select your name. I want you to pick a impact font. So look for a thick font. If you can't find impact, find something that's very thick. So check your properties panel. You'll notice that your character panel may not be there. If that's the case, go to Window, Character, so you can see your leading, tracking, and kerning. Make sure your kerning is on metrics, your tracking is on 0, and your leading for this exercise won't matter, but I'd go ahead and swap that back to 12 points just in case. Now, I've got my text here. I need to make it bigger. I want to cover a large area of this image. Make sure it stays on the image though. Once I have this, when I let go of this mask, when I change tools, this redness is going to go away. And what I'm left with, clicking on my move tool, what I'm left with is just a selection of the text that I just had. So what can I do with a selection? I can do anything. I can paint into this if I want to. So I could sit here and draw it out like this. I don't necessarily want to. I can also create a layer mask using this. So on my type mask tool, hit the layer mask option. And that puts your image directly in your text. Pretty cool, right? Command Z, go back, then hit Command D. Let's get rid of that for a second. Let's try this another way. This time grab your regular horizontal type tool. Click again, type your name again. So it covers a nice large area. Move it around where you want it to be. Now once it's in location, we're going to do something different. We are going to clipping mask this. Now to do this, I need to go to my layers panel real quick, and I need to move my type layer underneath my image. Once it's underneath, I'm going to hold Option. Once I've got it in location, I'm going to hold Alt or Option just underneath my type mask tool. That's going to give me this little symbol, and this will create a clipping mask down. So when I click here, it masks that image into that text, giving me the look that I want to have as well. Now this one gives me a little bit more freedom because I can quickly click on that image and move that image around inside that text. I can click on the text and move it around as well. Now you can do this with the layer mask too, but it's not quite as user friendly. So put your image in your text however you would like to do it. As long as it's in there, I'm happy with it. So what did we talk about today? We talked about our type tool, T for type tool. We talked about how we can utilize type and how we can make type more interesting along the way. We talked about how we can layer mask type into our areas. We talked about typing on a path and typing inside of areas. We talked about kerning, tracking, leading. These are key terms for passing your certification exam. There are a lot of terms when it comes to text, and I recommend spending some time really looking into these words and diving into what they mean. A lot of this stuff is very basic, such as baseline. Think of that notebook paper. Baseline is that blue line you used to draw on. Caps height, that's the height of a capital letter. It's not complicated. It just takes a little to get used to these. So if you liked any of the information you got today, you enjoyed the lesson, please like, subscribe to the channel, If you have any ideas or thoughts around this, anything I might have missed, feel free to add a comment. I love getting comments. Feel free to add whatever you would like. So that's your daily dose of design. See you in the next one.